Hello folks, Dom Lawson here from Metal Hammer magazine, as you probably know, and apologies for the lack of iron sandwiches recently. No, I'm not sorry really, so bollocks to you. It's a lovely sunny day here in West Sussex, and I'm a bit behind with a few of the new releases that have been around, but I'm going to get one out of the way that I should have done a bit earlier, and it's a kind of a twofold sandwich. It's like a heavy metal club sandwich, if you will. If I can just find the flipping CD. Oh no, it's down here. There we go. This is the album, one of the best albums of the year so far, without any shadow of a doubt. And I'm sure most of you that are fans of this band will already have got it or heard it or whatever. But I'm going to talk about it anyway because, as I say, there's a double reason for talking about this. But anyway, it's the new album by Napalm Death, and it's called Utilitarian. It's out on Century Media Records. It came out last week. And I mean, I don't think you have to know too much about me as a music fan or a music journalist to know that I'm a massive Napalm Death fan. They would be in my top 5 bands of all time without any shadow of a doubt. Their importance to me on a musical level and on a personal level is immense, and so I'm horrendously biased, and I'm not going to say anything negative about them anyway, even if they did make a rubbish record. But the fact is, this is one of the very best things they've ever done, and it comes at a time when I think a lot of extreme music is don't get me wrong, there's absolutely tons of fantastic stuff around, as there always is, and it's a very exciting time for metal. But there are also an awful lot of bands around that are, kind of just copying other things, and especially young bands that don't seem to really have any genuine inspiration, and just kind of, feeding off their influences and not really contributing anything new. And I think one of the things that is underestimated about Napalm Death, particularly in recent times, is exactly how original and inventive and eclectic they are as a band. I think they've long been a kind of shorthand for for people who don't really listen to this kind of music. Napalm Death kind of represent incredibly fast, brutal music. And that's right, of course, because they've been so so influential over the years. Excuse me. But Utilitarian, I think, absolutely rams home the undeniable truth that this is a band that are pushing extreme music forward and in all kinds of weird directions and off on strange tangents. I mean, I think their early stuff is obviously extraordinarily important in the grand scheme of things, and I'll come to that in a bit. And as they progressed through the 90s, they did a lot of really groundbreaking stuff, and incorporated a lot of kind of grooves and I guess modern metal elements into what they were doing, and that 90s time is sometimes much maligned by people, but it is actually go back to those albums like Diatribes and Fear, Emptiness, Despair, and it's incredibly forward thinking and exciting music. But certainly since the album they made back in, I think, 2000, which is called Enemy of the Music Business, they've been on fire, creatively, and they've made brilliant album after brilliant album. Greatly aided by the crazy genius of producer Russ Russell, but just on absolutely amazing form ever since. And I think the albums like The Code Is Red and Time Waits for No Slave and Smear Campaign, those are the 3 that kind of come before this one. They're just amazing albums, absolutely bulging with ideas. And exciting moments, and as always with Napalm Death, lyrics that actually mean something. This is a band that have something to say, whether it be a political statement or a personal statement. That Barney, the frontman Barney Greenway, is incredibly passionate and articulate about his belief in an ethical way of living and an anti-capitalist stance, and you can kind of belittle that by just saying it's kind of left-wing moaning, but it's not about being left-wing or right-wing really. It's about being a human being and caring for the rest of humanity, which I think is a really important thing. I know that's not the cool thing to say, but that's it chimes with my own particular view of the world. So as a kind of bleating old socialist with liberal tendencies. That's I find it something I can relate to. And then it's done with great passion and genuine rage and genuine a musical invention that reflects the importance of the things that they're singing about. And anyway, I think Utilitarian is their finest album in a long time, and I think I've seen a lot of people say more or less the same thing. It's a record that takes the basic kind of the rudiments of the Napalm Death sound, which of course is grindcore, incredibly fast, chaotic, extreme metal and punk. But it also takes them into a lot of new avenues, and I think it's often underestimated how much the band have been influenced, and this goes right back to the start. Have been influenced by bands like Sonic Youth and Swans, and even the Jesus and Mary chain and things like that. It's the use of noise and of sound and of dissonance, and there are elements of the avant-garde in what Napalm Death do, and I think that's part of what makes it so impressive, really, is that they manage to do that, and yet they still make incredibly brutal metal records that you can bang your head to, And this album, is no different from any of their recent ones in terms of the sheer diversity of the material on it, but it's just, I just think the songs are the best that they've written in a long time. I just pick out a handful. I mean, Analysis Paralysis, which is the one they've got a video for, and it's coming out in a limited edition 7-inch, I believe. It's just a classic, kind of latter-day Napalm Death song. Is incredibly powerful and exciting. I think that's the thing about Napalm Death. They're a bunch of guys in their 40s, and they're making this incredibly exciting music that makes a lot of younger bands sound a bit pedestrian and lame, really. Everyday Pox is my favourite track on the album. It features a guest appearance by John Zorn, who I'm sure you will know. Many of you will know who John Zorn is. He's a saxophonist from New York. He's very, very active in the avant-garde, jazz and weird music scene. He had a band called Naked City, who memorably released an album on Earache called Torture Garden, which is an absolute classic, and I urge you to get a copy of that. But he's made hundreds of records, and they're all very bizarre and generally incredibly interesting. Well worth checking his stuff out. He's collaborated with Mike Patton and the Boredoms and all sorts of crazy bands. He produced the first Mr. Bungle album. It's that kind of thing. The man's a genius, and so it's a vicious 2-minute Napalm Death track that also has this kind of explosive saxophone playing on it, which is wonderful. There's another track called The Wolf I Feed, which is amazing. It's got a clean vocals in the chorus, which in a superficial way, I suppose you could say, sound a bit like Fear Factory, in that there's a melody that comes in the middle of a load of brutality, but actually it's, I guess, for me, more reminiscent of some of the kind of mid-period Swan stuff. It's that kind of almost mantra-like vocal that adds a real kind of sinister and kind of ominous edge to what Napalm would do. But again, in the middle of this kind of, fury of chaotic riffs and vicious blasting, it's fabulous, And then there's a number of perhaps more straightforward Napalm Death tracks, things like Quarantined and Blank Look About Face, that are just absolutely vicious, but undeniably thrilling. I think it's just it's an incredibly exciting record. The sound of it is fabulous. No one else sounds like Napalm Death. They're in a scene where hundreds of death metal bands all go for the same kind of Pro Tools approach and have the same production, and you can kind of cut and paste riffs from one album to the other without anyone noticing. Napalm Death are utterly distinctive, and it's to their credit that they're still able to, you hear Napalm Death, and if you're a kind of student of these things, you'll know it's them immediately. The artwork is fabulous. That's a proper old school fucking grind alternative technical style album cover. That's amazing. The lyrics are great as always, and I don't know. I just think this will be in my top 10 at the end of the year. I'm pretty certain, because it's just such a fabulous record. It reminds, I mean, I could say this about any of their albums really in recent times, but it totally reminds me why I love this band so much. It's everything that I want from an extreme album, and I think they're a band that deserve to be mentioned in the same breath as Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Motorhead. The really influential bands. I think they're the vast majority of extreme music, the blasting, the growls, all that kind of stuff. If it hasn't been influenced by Napalm Death, it's been influenced by somebody who's been influenced by Napalm Death, and that's, this makes them one of the most influential and important bands in the history of the music. Now this brings me to the other part of this, which is that Earache Records are releasing a 25th anniversary edition of Scum, which is Napalm Death's first album. Now, it's terrifying to think that that came out 25 years ago. All I can think of is how ridiculously fucking old I am. But but I remember hearing Napalm Death for the first time on John Peel's show on Radio 1, which I listened to religiously during my teenage years and beyond that. And it's just, what can I say? The impact that Scum had on me was immense. I remember I had to order it from Our Price Records because it was a little bit too obscure for them to actually stock it. But I bought it, and it genuinely blew my mind. I'd been listening to thrash and death metal and stuff already, but nothing that was that extreme or that bleak or that intense, exciting, inventive, all those things. And to think that it's 25 years since that came out is quite mind-blowing, really. But so there's a special 25th anniversary edition of Scum coming out with a ton of unreleased stuff on it. A load of different recordings of the original album. I don't have the info to hand because I'm not that organised, but it's going to be an absolute must-buy for anybody that loves extreme music, because it's such an important record. And I think if you contemplate heavy music, extreme music in its entirety, Scum is up there in the if there's, I'm sure you could put 30 albums in the top 10, but it's got to be one of the most important albums of all time in terms of extreme music. And it still sounds amazing now, actually. Although as primitive as it is and as naive as it is in some ways, it's still incredibly thrilling. And there's a reason why Napalm Death still play tracks from that live, even though nobody from those recordings is still in the band. But it's legendary stuff, really. And I think it's a reminder that in any era there are bands that perhaps don't achieve vast commercial success, but that have a huge lasting impact on everything that follows. And I can't overstate how important Scum and Napalm Death as a result of that have been to me over the years. I just think they're one of those bands that have always been there for me and made music that's kind of made life worth living, really. And I hope that there'll be an anniversary edition of From Enslavement to Obliteration, the second album, which I think is probably my favourite of the first two. But again, ridiculously influential. And when people talk about grindcore and I saw somebody say something absolutely ludicrous the other day on the Guardian website. I wrote an article about Napalm Death for the Guardian, and someone in the comments. Always a mistake to read the comments, but somebody said, "Oh yeah, Napalm Death aren't really grindcore anymore," and I was thinking, what are you on about? They're the definitive grindcore band. Grindcore was never, I've said this several times in Iron Sandwiches, but anyway, grindcore was never just about one style of music. It was about the grinding noise. And when the phrase was first coined, it included everything from Napalm Death and Brutal Truth and all those kind of bands, right through to things like Godflesh. Because it was about grinding. It wasn't about just being a kind of mixture of death metal and Discharge, although those were important parts of it as well. And I think the thing with grindcore is it goes beyond being a style of music, and it's kind of an ethos, and it's an adventurous approach to extreme music that combines unexpected elements into something new and exciting. And you hear that on Scum, again, as primitive as it is, and you'd certainly hear that on Utilitarian, which is an absolutely jaw-dropping record. If you only buy one extreme metal release this year, then I think Utilitarian by Napalm Death should be it, and get a copy of the Scum 25th anniversary edition as well, because it's like I say, it's legendary stuff. If you don't own a copy of Scum, then you really are failing on an absolutely disgraceful scale. It's as important as any album I can think of, and I recommend it to you. Hardly needs saying, really, does it? But there you go. So Napalm Death, one of my favourite bands of all time. Their glorious debut album reissued, and a brand new album which is destined to be one of the true classics of 2012, I think. There you go, Iron Sandwich for you on the great Napalm Death, and more of this bollocks soon. Hope you're all well. Have a banana, and I'll see you soon.